Okay, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. None of it's true, but thank you anyway. My name is Peter, recovered alcoholic, and grateful to be alive and sober, and part of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I don't get on Zoom as much as I used to, so it's always like getting used to it all over again. I always feel like I dropped acid and turned on the Brady Bunch when I see all these boxes. But I'm glad to be here and get to share for a little bit. Before I get going, I'll just share something that happened earlier. Um, it's just one of the things that happened out of living this life. My wife and I was sitting on the couch, and there's a beautiful sunset happening, and my wife kind of had her head on my shoulder, and we're just relaxing, and not much was being said, and just kind of staring off together, and it was perfect, and absolutely perfect. And there was a thought that came across like, this won't be forever. These times pass. To embrace life is firm as I could, because it'll never come back again. And all the chopping wood and carrying water puts me in a position to sit on the couch with someone that no one else I'd rather be with, for a little while and just hang out. And then we got busy with our day. The phone rang, and my house is like a phone room in here. It's constantly ringing. But it was just one of those little uh, God winks for a moment that was absolutely wonderful. And that might not impress anyone or do much to anyone else, but for me, it was very heartfelt and it was important for me. Life is fleeting, it's fast, and what am I doing about it? Squandering hours that may have been worthwhile, holding grudges and resentments, living in fear, and basically going nowhere quick. As a friend of mine says, alcoholics, we don't know where we're going, but we're in a hurry to get there. So, what am I doing about right now? So, I will tell you, June 23rd, 1988 is when the loving God separated me from alcohol. I'm grateful to be a member of good standing in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so grateful for this gift of sobriety. I don't know if I'm just getting old or hopefully more mature, but it is so easy to get wrapped up in whether it's current events or just the stuff, the minutia of the day, and let that just drive you and really forget about a primary purpose and two, who's got my back all the time. That nothing can hinder God from protecting and saving me, and although my mind wants to convince me otherwise. So I'm very grateful that I'm able on most days to be current and present. I do have a sponsor. He was here last week, Bob Bazans. He's been my sponsor for a few years now. And I sponsor a bunch of men, not only in Florida, but kind of scattered around the states. And some of them actually call me, which is really remarkable. So I'm grateful to pack into the stream of life. Um, you know, I'm just in a place of, I don't know why. Maybe I see a lot of folks around me getting sick. Some of them very sick. I don't know if they're going to be here in a year from now. And hearing about folks passing. It started with my dad a couple of years ago, and it just makes me underscore when I say what I've been saying for the last few years, how important relationships are. My personal relationships, what do they look like? How am I doing with them? Am I nurturing those things? Am I appreciating those relationships? Because they're not going to be here forever. I won't be here or they won't be here, and I don't want to miss anything. Starting with my relationship with a God of my understanding. I've said this from a million podiums. Who am I praying to? Who is my God? What does it look like when adversity hits? Do I trust me or God? Am I worshiping God or the part of me that thinks it's God? And what have I put in place of God? my popularity, my money, my prestige, demanding respect and comfort from other people, all those things can quickly replace the God of my understanding, and I'm not even aware it's going on until it's too late. Yeah. So I really need to be free of, and I don't do this perfect, of any kind of grudges or resentments or tension I feel with people. I really need to double down on spiritual efforts and pray and write inventory and pray for forgiveness. I just can't afford that anymore. It's just too heavy a cross to carry. My God put one cross on my back. I carry it gratefully. He doesn't want me to carry two or more, and I can self-impose that if I'm not careful. In June of '88, I didn't have a clue, guys, about Alcoholics Anonymous. In 1988, I was about to enter my seventh treatment center. And you would think after six treatment centers, and albeit I showed up to AA meetings blind drunk a few times, I don't have any kind of history in AA before 1988, but you would think after all of that, I would at least know who Bill and Bob were. And I had no clue who Bill and Bob were. I remember I was in a sober house in Minnesota, and they would take us to outside meetings on the little white druggy buggy, and was sitting in a clubhouse, and there's these two big posters, one of Bill and one of Bob. And in my Brooklyn neighborhood third grade education, I'm thinking they're either the president and CEO or the two federal agents that discover this thing. They are not spiritual beings. And I didn't like those pictures. I always felt wherever I went, they were following me around the room. And an old timer came up, well, old time, he probably had about 5 years, and said to me, those are our co-founders. That's Bill Wilson and that's Dr. Bob. And I'm thinking, like, I really care. And about a week or two later, the new recruits came into the sober house, and we went back to that meeting. And by now, I have like maybe 3 or 4 weeks sober, 5 weeks sober. So I'm like a big shot. And I point to the post and I said, "Hey, kid, that's Bill and that's Bob. They founded this thing." And the old timer tapped me on the shoulders. "No, that's Bill and that's Bob. You got it wrong." So I basically have no clue about anything. My big book had dust on it. They gave it to me in the treatment center, my first one, and they gave me another one and the second one, another one and the third one, and they all had dust on them. I know nothing about the 12 steps. I know nothing. Now, I know one thing, I'm alcoholic, but what I don't know is how deep those roots go when it comes to alcoholism. I thought my problem was only in a bottle of whiskey and non conference approved dry goods. And I was in for a rude awakening when I found out it was just a symptom, that I'm suffering from alcoholism stone cold sober. And I can die from it without ever putting a drink in me, that it doesn't come in a bottle of whiskey. I'm the guy, the alcoholic, and my history proves this over and over and over again, that I will, and I'll do this sober if I'm not careful, pay any price tomorrow to seek comfort tonight. That's part of my story. And that'll happen to me while I'm sober, going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, perhaps with double-digit sobriety, that I'm still looking, for the out, the easier, softer way to get some relief, some instant gratification, some affirmation, some control, some power somewhere. Because on my own, sitting on my couch all alone, I can't do it. I got too many narratives. I got the chatter of 1,000 voices going on in my head. That's a terrible way to live sober, trying to go to AA meetings. It's a terrible way to live sober, trying to go to AA meetings and sponsoring people. And worse, when they say, "Hey, can you give us a talk?" And you have to pretend that everything's really good because the pressure to sound perfect is on, rather than just being transparent, because the ego won't allow me to do that. I've fallen away from AA when that stuff starts to happen. I had a sponsor, Mark Houston, who constantly asks us, "How far away from step one have you gotten?" And I would say, "Absolutely not. I'm right in the middle of it." And he would ask me, "How often have you prayed, meditated, wrote inventory, and helped another drunk?" Because any of those things are anemic. You're moving away from step one and you're in trouble. And my mind wants me to forget I'm an alcoholic. It'll keep telling me we haven't forgotten we're alcoholic, but my actions prove just the opposite. So um, when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, up until a number of years ago, I had very, very rigid sponsors, like really rigid. And look at, my sponsor always says, live life forward and understand it backwards. I look back on it now, it's exactly what I needed to have that kind of rigidity in my life with the people who sponsored me, to live, if you will, by the letter of the law. It's what I needed because I had too many edges, too many cards in the deck sticking out, and someone had to come along and streamline the whole thing and hold me accountable, even to the point where I started to annoy people. I try to live more by the spirit of the law today rather than the letter of the law. But it's what I needed back then. I'm very grateful for it. It's given me a full a bouquet, if you will, of recovery in my life for me, and I'm very grateful for it. I picked up a drink at 14 years old in Brooklyn, New York. That's where I'm from, an old Brooklyn boy. You can tell by the way I speak. I'm from somewhere that I didn't get educated, but growing up in Brooklyn, New York was a really cool place back in the 60s and 70s. I look back on it with mostly, not all, mostly fond memories. It was the innocence of some of what I experienced, and that was music and school and sports, um, where we would go down to the street corner with no money and hang out all night, get all dressed up to go to the street corner and have no money and thinking this was life. Occasionally, we pool our money, and the older guys would buy beer, and they would drink Colt 45 beer and listen to rock and roll or Motown on the street corner in the summertime. It was great. 20, 30, 40 people hanging out. Not a clue what we're going to do with our life, but it was a great time. It was the innocent climb. And then things began to change. I pick up a drink at 14, and my first drunk was, like many of us in this room, was euphoric. It made me pack into the stream of life. I was present to the moment. It did for me what I didn't have the power to do, and that was make me okay in my own skin, because I was never okay in my own skin. Even when I was making music, that ended, and I was back to being me and trying to do life on life's terms rather than God's terms, and I'm not okay. I had a mom at home who was really sick. My mom was, I was thinking about this the other day. A buddy of mine just lost his mom, and it caused me to reflect on my mom's life. My mom, from the time I can remember, was in and out of institutions for alcoholism, drug addiction, mental health, nervous breakdown, suicide attempts, the whole nine. And when I was 14, she took her life, and that walk with me right into recovery in 1988. I had a guy, I called him dad. I was terribly, and I'm not putting this mildly, I was terribly afraid of my dad. He was the alpha male and took no nonsense. And he came home, and you didn't know who was walking in the door that day. Um, Him and his lifestyle, he brought it home, and it was difficult being around my dad. And I was molested as a young boy for a couple of years. So by the time I get to my first drunk, I'm not okay. Life hurt. It was problematic. I'm full of fear and insecurity. Have you ever been so insecure that when you're speaking to someone, you have this other voice saying, well, that was stupid. You shouldn't have said that. And when you're not speaking, that same voice is saying, speak up, say something. You look like a dummy. So I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. I'm just not okay. I wasn't the toughest guy. I wasn't the most physical guy. It was just wherever I went, there I was, until I drank Colt 45 beer, and I got to be like, big and strong and good looking, and I thought all the girls really desired to be with me. It was just absolutely wonderful. The music sounded better. I felt better. That voice in the head went away. It was euphoric, and I wanted more of it. We don't realize how much bondage we're in until we taste a little bit of freedom. Um, there were many nights I remember crying myself to sleep, wondering how could this loving God take my mom away from me and leave me with this guy called Dad. And there were many nights in early recovery when I cried myself to sleep, wondering what am I going to do with my life? I'm 28 years old and I'm going to AA meetings. How lame is lame? How bad has my life gotten? Most of my friends that I remember were married with careers and had children, and I have zero money, zero job, zero prospects, and I'm living in a sober house in Hastings, Minnesota. I mean, how bad could it possibly get? That's sober. So I started to drink on weekends, and that, progression does what progression does. And I got into taking some non-conference approved dry goods to get me there quicker. I'm the guy who likes getting as low and numb to the world as possible. I tried that speedy stuff. I don't like it. I start saying things I shouldn't be saying and hanging around people I shouldn't be hanging around with and waking up to people I don't even know when I met them. And so I just like to be comfortably numb. And I sought that out with the desperation of a drowning man. And around 19 years old, I get taken to my first treatment center. And it wasn't something I wanted to do. I went there. My dad put all the pieces of the puzzle together about my life, which was already in trouble at 17, and he held on to 18 or 19. I don't remember how old exactly I was, but took me to a treatment center because he saw me being in trouble. My younger brothers knew something was wrong. My whole family knew something was wrong with me. They didn't know if it was just the drinking, the other stuff I was taking, a combination of both, or I was losing my mind. What I'm happy to report to you, what Alcoholics Anonymous has done is allowed me to lose my mind. And I hope my mind never returns, because when my mind shows up, I start to think, and that thought life becomes my current reality, and I'm not good again. So as long as I don't have a mind, I'm great. I'm your best friend. I walk into my first treatment center, and I remember when my dad drove me up there. I didn't go kicking and screaming. I was too afraid to debate with him, but I was petrified. And when we drove up, I realized it was the same hospital that we took my mom probably a couple of dozen times. It was a private psych hospital with a treatment center inside of it. And I said, oh my God, this is where I'm landing. And I did 28 days of being a good little guy while I was in there, not thinking I'm an alcoholic or anything else, quite frankly. And I got discharged after 28 days. And I was drunk in an hour. And then they made my second, third, and fourth, and fifth treatment center. And I lasted in 6 out of 7 treatment centers. My day count was 2 days. I'm not a 30-day, 90-day, 6-month guy. 2 days in 6 treatment centers, because if I wasn't locked up or in treatment, I was drunk, high, or both. There was no time off. And the 2 days that I had was after my fifth treatment center, which ironically, up until that point, was the longest I've been away. That was 9 weeks in a treatment center. And I white knuckled it for 2 days. And I remember that pretty clearly. I was at my dad's house. I had nowhere else to go, and I called him, collect. He said, "Come home and get in a cab and come home, and we'll figure it out." And as soon as I walked into, I realized this was a really bad idea, because if my dad could have put a leash on me, he would have, to save me from me. And I went upstairs to my room, and the room got small quick. It was just shrinking on me. The house was shrinking on me, and I'm feeling like I can't breathe, and I got to get out of here because I need to get a drink in me. And I white knuckled it for 2 days, and only an alcoholic will understand that. Not needing alcohol physically, but the mind is convincing me we need alcohol just to deal with what's happening in front of me. I need a little buffer between me and life. So on Monday morning, I snuck out of the house and I hopped in a car that was not mine, and I drove to South Brooklyn. And my plan was to get a pint of whiskey and drink in the car while I was driving, then ditch the car and go back to my dad's house. That was the plan. And alcoholism gave me the setup and the ambush. Because when I got to the liquor store, it was only about 4 o'clock in the morning. When I got there, everything was closed and it was dark out. And I'm starting to get agitated, and I'm starting to get anxiety. and I'm starting to pace up and down on the sidewalk, and I'm starting to feel like my body's going through withdrawal, and it wasn't. I'll never forget this. My belly immediately was starting to feel uncomfortable, and my chest, my heart is pounding against my chest, and my forehead is sweating, and my hands are clammy, and I'm believing I really need to get in there and get a drink. There was nothing wrong with my body. And when I finally got in there, when the liquor store opened, I bought a pint of whiskey and drank it down as fast as I could. Here comes the ambush. When I finished the pint, I felt so much better. My body relaxed. It's a sedative. I felt okay. The problem was I'm alcoholic and I had to walk back into the liquor store and get a second pint of whiskey. Isn't it unbelievable how we're commanded to drink the first one, but the second one screams even louder? Only an alcoholic understands that. I took the edge off. I was sedated, quite frankly, but I go into something called craving, or what I love to call the more. I need more, and I'll go to any lengths for more. I don't care what it is or who I have to step over, what I need to say or do. I'm in the process of getting more, and that's what I did. And by late that night, I'm panhandling, and I'm copping pills, and I'm drinking, and I can't go home in this condition. So I start hanging out with people, a lot of undesirables, just to crash out for the night. And I went on a really, really bad drunk. I got in some serious trouble, not only with the law, but with, I'll call street people. And my dad had to bail me out of both situations. I was in some trouble. And I was more afraid of the people on the street because they don't go by the law. They make up their own laws and you get hurt. And my dad had to get me out of those scrapes. I dragged my dad and my brothers and my uncles and my grandparents into my world of alcoholism. Our big book says years of living with an alcoholic will make any child or wife neurotic. The whole family has become ill. My family, bless their hearts, was suffering from alcoholism, and none of them are alcoholic. I am. But I'm like, if you get a glass, a clean glass of water, and drop just a little droplet of red dye in there, the whole thing turns red. And that was my alcoholism, just spreading it all over the family. And I had the arrogance to go into treatment and complain about them. I had the arrogance when I was brand new to think that all I had to do was not drink and go to a meeting. But the truth is true until I discover a new truth and I realize I owe. How am I going to pay this off? How am I going to fix this? How am I going to get out from under? I don't know. It's too overwhelming. In my sixth treatment center, I walked out after 36 hours because the realization of what I had done to so many was overwhelming. I just figured I was better off if I just went away somewhere permanently and died. I didn't like being sitting in there in jail. I'd never been to prison, thank God. But jail is a hellhole. Being on the streets is a hellhole. Being in this skin is a hellhole. And drinking's not working anymore. It's an awful place when we get to, and I've heard enough of your stories, that no matter how much alcohol we put into our body, it doesn't take us there anymore. We're still stuck with what we started out with. I just figured if I can die, I'd be better off for everyone. And I was in some flea bag motel in Staten Island, New York, and that's what I tried to do. Eat a bunch of pills and got into bed and waited to die. And God interrupted my death. The great thing about recovery is when we're spiritually fit, I no longer don't feel apart from God. What I do feel is a part of God. That's a tremendous freedom. And in that freedom, I get free of me, no longer for me, but from me. The further away I am from me, the better off I'm doing. The further away I get away from this thinking mind, I'm doing fabulous. And what the 12 step did was drive a wedge between me and me, put some space between me and my thinking. I didn't see that coming when I first got sober. I'm glad it happened. And so I'm on the streets after my six treatments, a full-fledged bum, panhandler, trying to figure out where I'm going to sleep and where I'm going to get some food and where am I going to get money for whiskey and pills. You learn quick. And towards the end of my drunk in 1988, I found myself hanging out a lot on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, an area called Alphabet City. And I found this abandoned building. Um, and I used to hide out in the back of the abandoned building. I used to sleep in there and drink in there. And there was a street lamp outside, and the light kind of shined in a little bit to the hallway, a little beacon of light. It was so dark, and I was glad there was some light there because there were all sorts of things, happening in the background, and things crawling around. And I quite frankly was petrified. And I used to just stare at that light, and wondering, where's my life going? It's an awful realization when you wake up to the fact that you're a bum and look back on your first drunk, which was wonderful, saying to myself, how did I get here? None of this makes sense. And through a series of circumstances, I came to on the floor of a hallway. And I don't know, God did something for me what I couldn't do for myself. And that was allowed desperation to scream a little louder than the ego. And a moment of clarity showed up. A moment of clarity, a brief moment. It was just a quick window that opened and was about to close. But in that, the only thing I can think of was turning to that God who I hated. I didn't have nice words to say about God prior to June 23rd, 1988. But it was that God that I begged for mercy. And I look back on a lot of things I've been through in AA, and some of the changes I've seen happen in AA. A lot of outside influences trying to get in. And I realized you put a bunch of drunks together, a bunch of imperfect people. How does this thing survive? Well, it's God's unconditional love. But the thing I always hold on to, it's God's mercy, because where else is a guy like me going to go? To allow me to sacrifice my own ambitions for the good of the whole, that's only God's mercy. Where else am I going to go? What has held us together for so long? God's mercy. And that's what I need to return to many, many times on this journey when I'm agitated and doubtful, and maybe just a little fearful, is turn back to God's mercy. He's shown me his love over and over and over again. I need some mercy. I need some mercy when I make mistakes as well. And that's what God granted me on June 23rd, 1988, a do-over. It's a great story I heard by a pastor one time, and it was a friend. This guy went to his friend and he said, I really want to turn over a new leaf. I want to change everything and make restitution. Can you tell me all the terrible things I've done in my life? And the guy reads off a Rolodex of things that his friend has done. Another guy has the same story, but he goes to God instead and says, God, he said, I want to turn over a new leaf. Can you show me all the terrible things I've done in my life? And God's reply is, I don't remember. That's a God of mercy. There's no scoreboard. What God is interested in is my intent to know him. And although when I sponsor people, I'll take them through the book, and sometimes when I talk, I'll talk a lot more about the book than other times. But mostly, what people are interested is not the letter of the law, but a demonstration of goodwill in all my activities. How God is actually living in my life. Anyone can recite the steps in the book and the traditions. Just study them for 30 days. But really, how am I living? That is what's attractive to a newcomer. And quite frankly, my grand sponsor would always tell us, attraction, not promotion. How are you living? I know a lot of cats with a head full of knowledge and a belly full of beer. What's the transformation look like going live? How am I doing when no one's looking? When I'm alone in the car or in my house or in the supermarket? What does that really look like? And as I said earlier, when adversity hits, how am I doing with this God? So, my dad scooped me up off the street June 23rd, 1988, and took me to my 7 treatment center. And I was in the same treatment center in Long Island, New York, again, for about 10 days or 12 days. And I'm romancing another drink. because the detox was just god awful. I'm coming off of pills and booze, and it was hurting. And they couldn't. I wanted more medication than they were giving me, and I kept crying for more meds, and they were limited to what they could do. And I'm just dying to get out and get one more drink, and then go to AA. If I get a drink, I'll go to AA. I just need something to take the edge off. And what they did for me was help me save my life. And they sent me out to Minnesota. They told me people, places, and things are killing you. For years, I thought that was therapeutic nonsense. It's actually quite real. And they sent me out to Minnesota, and I did more treatment while I was out there. But some of the AAs would come in H&I folks, and bring meetings in. And prior to my 7 treatment center, they were an inconvenience when they would come in. They would ruin my TV time and the hanging out war story time. But when they would bring a meeting into treatment in my 7 treatment center, I was hanging on to every word they said. And looking back on it, what this merciful God did was close the ears to the mind and open up the ears to my soul. I was hearing from a different place. And I did nothing to earn that. I wasn't a full-fledged member of AA, been through the steps and had 100 commitments. I met sick and suffering, fall down drunk, and God threw me a life raft. And I heard something that was probably being spoken about for years, but I heard it for the first time. What I heard was hope. And I saw how these men and women were walking and talking, and how they would come for this silly H&I commitment dressed proper. Come to a treatment center on a Friday night and dress proper to talk to mostly folks who are not interested. I was. And I would collect phone numbers. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't think anyone had a cell phone back then. I don't know if I was ever going to call these people, but there was something in getting their number and shaking their hand that made me feel better about me. And then I went to a halfway house and a three-quarter house and a sober house. And I'll share a quick story with you. These men and women, they would look out for the newcomer, not stare at their cell phones like I see at too many meetings now before the meeting happens. We didn't have cell phones. They were watching the door. And bless the hearts of the old timers. They look for the new guy. And they knew I was new, and they would drive from the Twin Cities to Hastings, Minnesota, scoop me up on a Friday night and take me to a meeting. It was called the Three Legacies meeting. And everyone was suited up. It was wonderful. And then they take me back home, and then they would take me to a diner. They'd all go out to eat after the meeting. I'll never forget this. Was sitting in a diner, and they would buy me a soda and a burger and something to go home with, because they knew I didn't have any money. They knew that. They didn't shame me. I'll never forget this. And one night I'm sitting at the table, and this guy, Kip S., gave me a little AA coin, one of those 24-hour day coins or whatever the heck it was. Is, I want you to have this. And I was just so touched and honored by it. I thought like I was a good AA getting the Grammys for being a good AA. I got an award tonight. And I got back to my bunk. I was in a sober house. And I did what you told me to do, and I was get on my knees and thank God for another day of sobriety, and that's what I did. I didn't have much of a prayer life. I didn't know how to pray. I'm a cradle Catholic. I don't know how to pray. Looking back on it now, maybe it was a good thing. I've learned this, that help, if the intent is pure, is a complete prayer. And I took that coin, and it was on my nightstand, and I left it there, and I got into bed, and it was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. And then something started. The main problem for me centers in the mind, not the body. My alcohols and doesn't come in a bottle of whiskey, comes in my mind. And as I lay back on my head, the voices started something like this: who are you kidding? I mean, who are you kidding? These people live in Minnesota. You're not even from the state. They have college educations. They have jobs. You're a street bum. Who are you kidding? You're going to blow this up anyway. Well, you don't have a girlfriend. You don't have a wife. You don't have kids. You don't have a job. You have no money. Who are you kidding? And I was on thin ice. And I know I'm about to walk out the door and try to figure out a way to get drunk again because it was hurting again. Life suddenly started to hurt again. And I remember thinking, if I walk out the door and I start, I'm not coming back. And it scared me for the first time. And what I did was, and I don't know where this came from, I got out of bed and took that coin off the nightstand and tucked it under my pillow. And I made a prayer to God. And I said, Father, if you're still loving me, please send me your angels to keep me safe and protected because I'm going to die tonight if I walk out the door, and I don't want that. And I just about cried myself to sleep. But what happened was I woke up in the morning. I was still in that bed and I woke up sober. It was one of those God winks where I've said very often, knowing that I'm known by my Creator. It's little things like that, or perhaps big things, that we know God's in our corner watching us because based on my power, my will, I'm walking out the door. Nothing ever stopped me before. Consequences don't stop me from drinking. I'll pay any price tomorrow to seek comfort now. And that was a perfect example of it. Well, you're going to get arrested. I'll worry about it later. She's going to leave you. I'll figure it out later. Right now, my eyes are glued on a bottle of whiskey out of the way. And God got in the way of that. This merciful God. This is why, for a guy like me, I need to talk about my God, my big book, my steps, my AA, and forgive the my in that, but it is personal to me because if I stop talking about that, I'll stop believing in it. I need to talk about what has worked for me and shout that from the rooftops and never apologize for any of it. So that's what I do as I move to do. I came home after about a year of living in Minnesota, and I was being put back together little by slowly. And I didn't know it at the time, but perceptions and conceptions started to change. AA became really vital to me, it was important to me. I was admiring some of the old timers. I wanted to be like them, I wanted to sound like them, I wanted to dress like them. And when I got back to New York, I was taken to my first home group. It was called the Free Spirit Group in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And I walked in and it was packed and I was petrified. And someone brought me in and introduced me to all the men. And they circled the wagons. They weren't all big book guys either. A few of them were. But I was new and I knew how important that was. And they put their numbers on a meeting list and handed it to me. They told me, dial them, don't file them. And I started to go to that meeting and I met my first sponsor there. And he wasn't really well received by many in that part of Brooklyn because he was operating out of the big book. And it wasn't very popular back then. I know now everyone's a big book expert in AA, but back then it wasn't. It wasn't like that. There was a few people, and he came out of the book, and I was attracted to that because he sounded like the people in Minnesota. And he turned me on to meditation and prayer immediately, inventory almost immediately. And I went through the steps with him, and things started to change. I'll share this with you. The innocent climb. When I got home, I didn't know where I was going to live. And my kid brother, my youngest brother, told my dad, let him stay with me. My brother had a one bedroom, and so I would sleep on the couch. And my brother didn't charge me a penny. He knew I wasn't working and trying to get on my feet. And sometimes I'd even sleep on the floor. It was more comfortable. Um, it was a Sunday night. The goose hung high here, and everyone was walking on thin ice with me being home. It was a Sunday night. I went to a meeting that morning, and I was standing on the corner waiting for the bus to come to take me about 5 miles to St. Mary's Church that had a 7 or 7:30 meeting. I was doing 2 days, and I'm standing. It's a rainy, cold, dank night in Brooklyn. It was just icky out, and I'm waiting for the bus to come, and no one's out. And I'm trying to hide underneath the awning of the storefront not to get wet. And my youngest brother was coming home from the gym, and he turned the corner. And as he's walking up the block, he sees me standing there, and he turned white as a ghost. He says, "Where are you going?" He thought I was up to my old shenanigans again. And I realized that although the wounds might close, the scars might stay forever. And I let him know, I assured him where I was going to an AA meeting, as I'll pick up some pizza. I'll be home around this time. We'll have pizza and we'll hang out. And what I did was I made sure I picked up pizza and got home around the time I told him. And I rang the bell. He opened the door, and I was standing there with pizza. And we sat down, and he's just staring at me because he couldn't believe his brother kept his word and was still sober and went to a meeting. It's those little moments, not what I'm saying, but my actions will convince them more than my words, my big book says. And I didn't do that to convince my brother. I was being made new. It was important for me to stick to my word and keep my commitment and spend time with my kid brother, who allowed me to stay in his house. And I saved up enough money when I got a job and I got my first apartment, and I slept. I had no furniture in it, and someone in AA gave me a sleeping bag. Someone gave me an old black and white TV with the old rabbit ears. It hardly worked, but it was given to me, and I slept in a sleeping bag. I had bumper stickers, AA bumper stickers on the door. I'm a Catholic, I had a crucifix above my door. Somehow I had my hands on a Bible. I don't know where it came from, in the big book. I slept in a Ritz Carlton that night. I didn't have a phone or a coffee pot yet, but I was working at a home group. I was sober. I had a sponsor. I'm going through the steps, and I know I'm going to work tomorrow morning if God wakes me up, and I know what meeting I'm going to that night. I hit the lottery. I was bathing twice a day. I was eating 3 times a day. It wasn't like that being on the street where I didn't bathe and I didn't eat. I don't know where I was going. It's an awful feeling when you're roaming through the streets at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you realize if you wind up dead through an accident or something, that I'm a John Doe till further notice, because I have no ID and no one knows who I am. I'm a John Doe. And I felt like no matter how loud I scream, no one's going to hear, because when you're homeless, no one pays attention to you. You're a non-person. So my early days in AA, I cherish them. What I'm happy to report to you, I do this walk with some very dear friends and a woman I adore, and I'm not alone. I still cherish it. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I do none of this perfect, by the way. I make mistakes. I trip over my own feet. I get my own way. I create fear, all of it. My human condition gets in the way. I used to think I was failing on the spiritual path, and I realized, listening to some of my sponsors and one particular priest, that this is exactly how God designed it, that I be broken and flawed. It's a greater need for Him. And what do we identify with when we speak? Our brokenness, our shared brokenness. Whether it's getting in here, or some of us, the challenges we have when we're sober, when we're just afraid, or maybe we screwed something up innocently. Or maybe we're out of work and don't know how we're going to pay the bills. Or maybe someone we love died. And just we get that. We share that freely. And we also offer the solution on how to walk through it. And whether it's the steps, it's the big book, it's the meeting, it's service, and all those are roads to one place, and that is to put my hand in God's hand. The merciful, loving God. To me, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a soulful walk. Not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. Only in Alcoholics Anonymous. Most people I know who are civilians are regretting the past and want to shut the door on it. We say, no, 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 no. It's our best asset right now. I'm not ashamed of it anymore. And I'm not so afraid of the future anymore. There's a lot more God in me than behind me. I'm very grateful for that. So this journey of Alcoholics Anonymous and meditation has answered a lot of riddles I had about where my mom went when she passed, and quite frankly, my purpose. When I'm not sure of my purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know what I go back to? Stay sober, help another alcoholic, achieve sobriety. Okay, got it. That's why God hired me. Whether I'm a rich man or a working guy, which is what I am, I have, a nice position in my company. My wife and I do, but I'm a blue collar guy. I have a purpose on this journey. Stay sober, help another alcohol, achieve sobriety, and please God at all costs. It seems to be when I'm pleasing God and I'm right with God. When I'm right with God, I'm right with me. When I'm right with me, I'm okay with you. And I can experience sitting on a couch with my wife, not saying or talking, and the two of us just leaning against each other like a loving couple and just staring out the window, knowing everything's good. We're good. I've never had that before. I never had friends until I got to AA and developed friendships where I feel like I can trust, like I have brothers and sisters, and I'm not putting that lightly. That I can basically pick up a phone and say, "Hey, I got some stuff to talk to you about. I'm embarrassed. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I'm resentful," and they're not going to sit in judgment about it. Only in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll close with this: AA makes absolutely no sense if you think about it. Based on my track record and what I've done getting in here, you don't want to listen to me. I can tell you how to screw things up pretty good. How do we find this wonderful path? Only in Alcoholics Anonymous it doesn't make sense. I have found this, that the only thing God wants from me is my soul. Yeah, I give him my soul and he gives me a life. I've given him my life and he's given me purpose. Over and over and over again, I've given him my sinfulness and he's given me forgiveness. And I've given him my drunkenness and he gave me sobriety, give him my sobriety, and he gives me the sacred rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm way overpaid, but grateful God keeps me here. So I chop wood and carry water and try to pass this message on. Quite frank, with the same love and gratitude that was given to me when I got here, and even currently. So I'm grateful, and that's all I got, guys. Peace.